Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Robert H. Goddard, American Rocketry Pioneer. Dr. Robert H. Goddard is considered the father of modern rocket propulsion. A physicist of great insight, Goddard also had a unique genius for invention. Born in Worcester, Massachusetts on October 5, 1882, Goddard knew from a young age that he wanted to build a rocket that was capable of leaving the Earth's atmosphere. At that time, that dream was pure fantasy, as the Wright brothers had not made their first short-powered flight. Young Goddard was a good student and always excelled in his studies. By 1911, he had graduated with a Ph.D. in physics from Clark University. With the help of one of his professors, he was able to obtain a research position at Princeton University's Palmer Physical Laboratory. His stay at Princeton was short when in early 1913 Goddard became seriously ill with tuberculosis and had to leave his position at Princeton. He then returned to his parents' home in Worcester, where he began the long process of recovery. His doctors did not expect him to live. He spent time outside in the fresh air, walked for exercise, and gradually improved. It was during this period of recuperation that Goddard began to produce some of his most important work on rocketry. To protect his designs and intellectual property, he started to apply for patents. In May of 1913, he wrote his first rocket patent application. By 1914, his health had improved enough for him to accept a part-time position as an instructor and research fellow at Clark University. Here he could further investigate his rocketry. By 1926, Goddard had constructed and successfully tested the first rocket using liquid fuel. Indeed, the flight of Goddard's rocket on March 16, 1926 at Auburn, Massachusetts was as significant to history as that of the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk. Primitive in their day as the achievement of the Wright brothers, Goddard's rockets made little impression on government officials. Only through modest subsidies from the Smithsonian Institution and the Daniel Guggenheim Foundation, as well as leaves of absence granted him by Worcester's Polytechnic Institution of Clark University, was Goddard able to sustain his lifetime of devoted research and testing. Goddard first attained public notice in 1907 in a cloud of smoke from a powdered rocket fired in the basement of the Worcester Polytechnic Institute Physics Building. School officials took an immediate interest in his work. The school administration, to their credit, did not expel him. He thus began his lifetime of dedicated work. In 1914, Goddard received 2 U.S. patents, one for a rocket using liquid fuel, the other was for a 2 or 3-stage rocket using solid fuel. At his own expense, he began to make systematic studies about propulsion provided by various types of gunpowder. His classic document was a study he wrote in 1916 requesting funds from the Smithsonian Institution so that he could continue his research. It was later published along with the subsequent research and naval work in a Smithsonian journal entitled A Method of Reaching Extreme Altitudes. In this treatise, Goddard detailed his search for methods of raising weather recording instruments higher than sounding balloons. In his search, he developed the mathematical theories of rocket propulsion. Toward the end of his 1920 report, Goddard outlined the possibility of rockets reaching the moon and exploding a load of flash powder there to mark its arrival. The bulk of his scientific report, the Smithsonian, was a dry explanation of how he used the $500 grant in his research, $5,000 grant in his research. The press picked up Goddard's scientific proposal about the rocket flight to the moon, however, and created a journalistic controversy concerning the feasibility of such a thing. The resulting ridicule created in Goddard firm convictions about the nature of the press corps, which he held for the rest of his life. Goddard's greatest engineering contributions were made during his work in the 1920s and 1930s. He received a total of $10,000 from the Smithsonian by 1927, and through the personal efforts of the famed aviator Charles A. Lindbergh, he subsequently received financial support from Daniel and Florence Guggenheim Foundation. Progress in all of his work, titled Liquid Propellant Rocket Development, was published by the Smithsonian in 1936. Goddard's work largely anticipated in technical detail the later German V-2 missiles, including gyroscopic control, steering by means of vanes in the jet stream of the rocket motor, gimbaled steering, power-driven fuel pumps, and other devices. His rocket flight in 1929 carried the first scientific payload, a barometer, and a camera. Goddard developed and demonstrated the basic idea of bazooka 2 days after the World War I armistice of 1918 at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. His launching platform was a music rack. In World War II, Goddard again offered his services and was assigned by the U.S. Navy to the development of practical jet-assisted takeoff and liquid propellant rocket motors capable of variable thrust. In both areas, he was successful. Robert Goddard died on August 10, 1945. Following the Rocketry Pioneer's death, his widow Esther Goddard championed his work. On September 16, 1959, the 86th Congress authorized the issuance of a gold medal in the honor of Professor Robert H. Goddard. Estelle Goddard was on hand for the formal dedication of NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center on March 16, 1961, 35 years to the day after the professor launched the first liquid-fueled rocket from his Aunt Effie's farm. Goddard was the first scientist who not only realized the potential of missiles and spaceflight, but also contributed directly in bringing them to practical realization. Goddard had a rare talent in both creative science and practical engineering. The dedicated labors of this modest man went largely unrecognized in the United States until the dawn of the space age. High honors and wide acclaim, belated but richly deserved, now come to the name of Robert H. Goddard. In the words of Dr. Goddard, "It is difficult to say what is impossible, for the dream of yesterday is the hope of today and the reality of tomorrow." I hope you enjoyed this podcast and found it informative. If you would like to learn more about the life and accomplishments of Dr. Robert Goddard, you can purchase my short biography, Dr. Robert H. Goddard, A Brief Biography, Father of American Rocketry in the Space Age. The book will be available in June of 2017 on Amazon and other online retailers. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel.